Good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. I'm Phyllis Bobrow, and Sisterhood is delighted to bring this presentation to you today. Our presenter is Dr. Geoff Simmons. He's a board-certified internist and hospitalist, retired from Peace Health after 44 years, and past president of the local medical society. He's also a national speaker on disaster preparedness and has taught at Nassau. Geoff has written 10 books, one of which deals with preparedness. He is a CERT trainer. CERT stands for Community Emergency Response Team, and a trainer of trainers. He recently was chair of Lane Preparedness Coalition for 2 years. Geoff has 2 years' experience as a FEMA advisor for Region 10, and we are honored to have him present to us today. I thank you all for making time on this lovely day to join us, and Geoff for offering your knowledge to us. Thank you.
No, my pleasure. Glad to be here. This is the easy way. Do it from home. Glad to be here. So, are we ready to the slides? Judy, you think?
Whenever you tell us that you want to start the slides, then I'll start sharing.
Sounds good. What we're going to do is, because of time and information that's kind of esoteric, we're going to skip the first few. We're going to go to 2 slides, and then we'll skip to number 8. And this would be the first slide. And this is a presentation that I've given many times over 20 years. It was prepared for the county. It's been given by the city, and it has most to do with the Cascadia earthquake. But what you need to keep in mind is, if you're prepared for the earthquake, you're fairly well prepared for most anything else that can happen. And so rather than to pick out different events, and they are picked out during the course of this, we're going to go full bore into maybe the worst thing that could happen to us here, and go from there. And I'll try to cover stuff that you don't know and some stuff that you should know. But what I think I'd like everybody to write down, if you can, is write down ready.gov. That's all you need to do is write down ready.gov. And then after that, write down FEMA.gov. And on ready.gov, you name the catastrophe, there's pages on it. You name the preparation that you need to prepare with and have, including minor to-go kits and big to-go kits and long-term survival. You'll find it there. So anything that you didn't catch me say or want to revisit, you can revisit there and then some. The book that I wrote a number of years ago became obsolete very quickly because people get their information very quickly online now. It was just about the time things were transitioning. And although you can still sort of get it, it's around and put it in your back pocket, all the phone numbers are obsolete, and a lot of things are, obsolete, but not the preparation. But anyway, if you go to ready.gov, you can find out almost anything you want, and it's very, very easy to navigate. So I'll just give you highlights. What we're worried about most here, usually what I do is I ask the audience to raise their hands or something, but I don't know if I'm going to go that route, save time, is not the earthquake. Mostly what we're worried about is winter storms, ice storms, wildfires, maybe a hazmat problem, but not the earthquake itself. That said, you all need to know that we've had this Cascadia event that we know of at least 7 times, and many more times going back in time over the last 2,000 years. In other words, they happen about every 300 years. We are 22 years late on the 300 mark. So one would say or worry that we're going to get it. It's just a matter if it's us or our kids or our grandkids. It's going to happen. It's gone as far as 500 years, and it's been as close as 200 years. And the reason we know that, if you go to the coast, the northern Oregon coast and the Washington coast, there's some areas where the land has dropped And if you look at the sand in between the soil, in between sand, in between soil, and if you're a geologist, you can time out when the sands came in, and that's with the tsunamis. And so we know that the last one was 1700. The reason we know that actually is not because the reason I gave you is that the Indians have kind of given us a date and a time. They describe having lost many thousand, probably, they didn't count them, Indians who lived on the coast. And the tsunami from that Cascadia event went all the way to Japan and wiped out a number of their villages. Japan kept records, and we know the time of that tsunami. We can count back because we know these things travel about 500 miles an hour, plus or minus. And so we know when it hit here. And so there's other records going back before that. So we're 300 years late. I almost hesitate to go to the coast these days. I don't know if I want to be in the coast anymore. And if I do show up, I'm probably going to go with an inner tube and a football helmet. It's a worry. It's a potential worry. And the coast knows that. I mean, they are preparing in hard ways, difficult ways, in every which way they can. I'm part of some of their meetings, but by Zoom only. I used to drive out there, but Zoom helps. Anyway, so for us, we're not going to get the tsunami. The tsunami won't go much further than Mapleton. But we will get the earthquake, and the Cascade event is a 9er, roughly. So we'll have an 8.5. That's devastating. So we prepare for that, for the worst. So we'll start with my slides, and I'll stick in my 2 cents on the slides as we go through. And I see everybody except for a few. If you raise your hand or wave, I don't know if this has a hand waving mechanism or not, reactions maybe, you can catch my attention, but try to catch my attention. So this is the slide that we started with. Ken Vogney is still the city emergency manager for Springfield. Forrest Chambers is retiring. Patient Winningham is our county manager. She is excellent. She won the Oregon Emergency Manager Award for the year, and she's only been on the job 2 years. She was broken in, but fast, with the fires, the winter storms that we had. They were terrible, some flooding, and a few other problems. So on her, what they call her bingo board for disasters, she's almost got 5 in a row. Next slide. And I will be calling out next slides. And I've been to 2 meetings since we planned this, and they were all calling out next slides too. So this is not unusual. We tried to set it up that I could change the slides, but Judy's going to change for me. So Judy, next one. Is it going to go play?
Okay, so now we're at the earthquake hazards. That's the number 8 slide. Jeff,
go to number,
that's the point where I think you wanted to go.
No, number 2 first.
And then remember what it said? I can go back, but it's basically just what we're going to.
You know what? You can skip it because it's just kind of the subject matter, like the table of contents. So you can go to 8.
Okay, so do you want to go ahead with the hazards of the earthquake, the ground shaking and ground failure and
number 8? Have you got it by number?
Yeah, that's number 8. That's number 8.
Not showing on our screens, Judy. We
Not
still
mine either.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I can't. One person speak. Can you see it?
No.
No.
I don't play any instruments, so I can't do any entertaining in between. Can you?
Okay. Now, do you see it now?
No.
No.
Okay.
Just forward to slide 8.
I did, but you can't see it, right?
No.
Nope.
Have you pressed the share button?
Yeah, I did. And it's my screen is saying it's paused and I'm resuming, but it's not letting me resume.
Can you hit play?
Hang on, hang on.
And it works so well in practice.
All right, let's try this again. Now.
Perfect.
All right, there we go.
All right. Okay, so these are relevant to the earthquake itself. And these would be the main headings of a good chunk of the slides we're going to go into. And is this number 8, Judy?
Yes.
Okay, so go to 9 now, next. So this is very important. I will try to cover perhaps the very most important. Most people don't have this drop, cover, hold on idea. And this is what you need to do if the ground's shaking. You don't run for the doorway. You don't run outside. Most people get injured by things falling from the ceiling and you won't make it, or you may not make it. So while things are shaking, you do this, drop, cover, hold. And I'll mention a couple of things in a moment here. Once it stops, perhaps a great idea is to get outside. Don't stop in the doorway. That's what everybody thinks they should do. And that's where everybody else wants to stop. So if you're in a group, you're going to get knocked out of there, or you're going to be fighting for it. And the reason for that is the old homes, the doorways used to be the last thing that would be left. So everybody thought that was the place to stay. But the doorways aren't nearly as stable as they were in the very old homes, ancient homes. And so get outside, don't stand next to a building, and don't maybe stand next to a tree or a pole. You can help it. The rule of thumb is if it's a 5-story building, stand the equivalent of 5 stories away or more. If it's 2 stories, equivalent to 2 stories away. It's an easy rule to remember. If you're lying in bed, the textbook says, the new textbook says to cover your head and stay put till things stop shaking. I'm not sure I'm going to do that, but that is what the textbook says. I'm heading for the corner of the room because the next most stable place in the room is the corner. When you see houses that have collapsed, you'll see that the corners are often still there in part. And don't stand next to a wall itself. It's in the literature, it got caught in there. Just next to a wall or curled up next to a wall, it's not your best source. And look up, if you're under a suspended TV set, that's probably not a good place to be. So staying in a doorway area while an earthquake is happening is a good way. Myth. Don't do it. Okay, next. Okay, this has to do with a part of the slide, I think is either a different color or a different shape. The slope instability, if you get a copy of these slides, you'll see a different view of this. What you're looking at will be a very small part of it. And it tells you where the dangers are and how serious the potentials are for slides. And if you're living on the side of a hill, you can actually calculate or see what your chances are and if you need to do something about your home. We don't have too much slide worry in this town. Portland's got a lot worse. In fact, Portland's got a lot of worse things than we have. A whole chunk of Portland is on landfill. We're going to talk about something called liquefaction in a little while, and I'll show you what that means. Go to the next slide. I'm watching for hands if anybody has one up. All right, this is where you can figure, it looks pretty busy, but it's pretty simple. And you probably can't see my arrow. Can you see my arrow here? No, probably not. It tells you if you live on a steep slope or not, and more information about the ground and what your risk is. Again, get my slides or get the recording of this event, and you can easily follow yes, no, and see what kind of risk you're at. Go to the next slide. Here's liquefaction. There's a picture. Okay. Think of a time at the beach with a bucket of sand and a ball in the sand. And if you shake the bucket, the ball or whatever it is, the toy sinks in the sand, it goes away. Well, that's what happens to homes and cars on certain kinds of land. So you need to know what kind of land you're on. And this is what it'll do. This road is on sandy kind of land that can cause things to sink while it's shaking. So not only breaking apart, but things can sink. And when you see pictures of earthquakes, you can sometimes see signs of liquefaction. Portland will have a lot of liquefaction. I think I'd rather be on the coast with a tsunami than Portland with liquefaction, but I'm not sure. They're both not good. Next slide, please. How a tsunami forms is this: the land drops way out with an earthquake, and then it pops back up, and it sets off these waves. And as these waves can go up to 700 miles an hour, and as they get closer to the, go back one if you would, as they get closer to the shoreline, the distance between waves gets shorter and the height of the waves get higher. Can you go back one? If you can't go back, you can see this also.
Yeah,
This is
yeah, no, I can't at this point.
okay. Don't go on any further. That's an example of the YouTube stuff we can't bring up. But what you need to know is the waves get closer and closer together, and they get higher and higher. In a 100-foot tsunami, hitting the coast would be devastating at 500 miles an hour. I mean, if you don't know what evacuation signs look like, just look them up, Google them. There's signs that tell you how to get out of town, what's the fastest route, always know 2 routes. And that's a big risk for these folks out there. They also have sirens now, and they have off-coast, offshore buoys that tell them something's coming. The sirens go off. That should be your warning to get out of town, and get out of town quickly and follow the evacuation routes. If you can't do that, go high ground, or go at least to a 3-story concrete building, because usually they can withstand that force. But it is a bit of a risk. The tsunami is the biggest risk, and that particular diagram shows you how the waves get closer and closer, how somebody could be out to sea fishing 3 miles away and not really know much has happened. Just a little bit of a wave comes through, and somebody on the coast can be smacked pretty hard. What you also need to know, which is critical, is that there's a fault line that's not very far off our coast that goes from Eureka to Canada. And that's where the Cascadia subduction zone, where it can happen. And it's only about 20, 30 miles away from us. It sinks and we're off to the races big time. And everybody from Eureka to Seattle and some is in desperate straits. And we're going to talk about how you're not going to get help from anybody else. Maybe they can fly in from Redmond or something to help us, but you're not going to get anything north or south of the I-5 if the Cascadia hits. And it's almost a guarantee it's going to hit. It's just a matter of when. Okay, next. All right, so here's the purple.
Here's Florence.
It is
Here's
Florence.
Florence.
It is Florence. And where the purple is by the Pacific Ocean, that's going to get slammed the very worst. The rest of it's going to go up the Siuslaw, and the purple is going to flood areas, like I say, all the way up to Mapleton, maybe a little bit further, but that's about it. But you got to get out of that coastal area for sure. And you may not be able to drive that route to Mapleton. You got to move quickly, get out of there, plan ahead. I mean, the chances are really slim, but every day that goes by in that 300-year mark increases your chances. Okay, next. See, that would be a 9 or maybe off the coast, and an 8 here, 8.5 maybe. That's huge. That's huge. The difference between 8 and 9 is monstrous. The difference between 8 and 9, if you can envision a warehouse, and 8 being a bag of seeds, maybe a big bag of seeds, and a 9 being loaded with bags of seeds. I mean, it's huge, huge, huge. Next slide, please. You go to the next slide. That's not my joke. My jokes are better. All right, fire is a major concern. Go ahead and bring all the writing on. And this is the sources. Fires are not uncommon. And what you also need to know is the fire department may not be able to reach you. The roads may be destroyed. The fire engines may not be able to get out of their engine houses. That has been altered a bit by an improvement. If there's an earthquake warning, the doors automatically go up. But overturned heat sources, braided and severed electric wire, spilled chemicals, can even caused by the friction of things rubbing together. You might keep in mind also that if you have a fire, there's no electricity, and you have a fire stove or a wood stove of some sort, rather, that's what I meant as a wood stove, things may be distorted. And if you light it up to keep your house warm, you may be setting a fire in your attic. So you need to make sure that that thing is intact before you use it. You also need to have firefighting equipment of sorts, at least an extinguisher, and we'll get to that in a minute. Next slide. Structural damage. That other slide, I think, was from Chile. That looks like Japan, and that probably is a small amount of damage. I've not seen this slide, and that was part of it. There's something that's more common. If you can be deceived by damage, we have, there's 6 more circles, we're gonna bring them up. We have inspectors in town that can go out and inspect homes and buildings after an earthquake. There's something like 60 or 80,000 homes, and there's 3 inspectors. So what do you think the chances are they're going to be able to tell you whether a building is safe or not? The answer is probably not. They do have signs that they put out, red, yellow, and green. Green means it's safe, red means it isn't, yellow has some marking on it telling you what isn't safe, but some of it is. If there's been an aftershock, the sign is void, even though they haven't had a chance to mark it void. So don't trust the sign if there's been an aftershock, and don't be very careful with a building if it hasn't been inspected. And it's going to take them years almost to see 60,000 homes. The same thing with natural gas, hooking it up. Only certain people can hook it up. That could also take years. Anyway, these are damaged infrastructures, and some of the words are covered up, but the upper left is fuel tank. Somebody's got their sound on, I think. There's transportation in the middle, buildings and structures on top right, phone and power, sewer and water. Keep in mind that power, if it's knocked down, the line is alive until they tell you it isn't. And they meaning the people who, electric people, the power people. They're not safe to go near, and if don't walk through a puddle near there. This is more information we see, I think, with the winter storms. Power lines are down and they're hot, and one has to be very careful. People want to drive over them and walk past them. You got to respect them. They will come out and put signs up saying it's safe. Again, depending on how bad the damage is and how close you are to a major thoroughway, it may take time. Next slide, Judy. I'm watching for hands if anybody has anything to say. Keep in mind that during large disasters, or ask rather, you may not be able to get to the hospital. If you live on the south side of the river, you may not be able to even get over to the other side of the river. And all the hospitals, for the most part, the significant hospitals are on the other side. Sacred has the old hospital here on this side, but it's not equipped to do anywhere near what a trauma hospital does. I mean, they can get going a little bit with some stuff, and it's better than nothing. And there's an emergency room there. But even their doctors may not be able to get to the hospital. Maybe their nurses won't come. And so you may have no medical care available to you. Banking, I tell people to have $200 or $400 at a minimum hidden away, I suppose, in your home in relatively small bills, because you won't be able to get money out of ATMs, given the worst case scenario. Next slide. Prepare your family, prepare your home, prepare your community, prepare your family. We have some training in town, the CERT training, CRT, you can get through both cities, but we've pretty much been hung up with COVID. We can't do hands-on stuff. And so you can contact either city, you can sign up, but we had to postpone classes several times. We're hoping to get a class started in the spring. We now have a hybrid system where you can take some of it online regardless. There's information from the Red Cross. There's plenty of information, as I mentioned, on FEMA.gov or ready.gov. And you can also learn what kind of equipment you should have. Your to-go kits, in other words, you have to leave quickly, and what you should have in your home. And we're going to touch on that a little bit, but those lists are long. Another point to make here is when we give these talks, these are kind of all-day talks, and I'm trying to hit the highlights for you in 45 minutes or an hour. So you have a bunch of homework that you can and should do, and it's really easy to put it off, but nobody knows when this is going to happen. God forbid it happens in the winter. We have much worse problems than we do in the summer for obvious reasons. Prepare your home, we're going to talk about that, and prepare your community. In regard to preparing your home, you'll find a lot to do, but if you have kids, you should talk to them about the exits, because kids notoriously during a crisis will hide in a closet or hide under a bed. And so if you don't teach them where to go and practice, don't just teach them and have them repeat it, have them practice. If you live on a second floor or their bedrooms are on a second floor or a third floor or higher, you might have to get one of these folding ladders to put over the window in some circumstance. That's a problem more in bigger cities, but it could be here. Apartment building, apartment on the third floor, you can't get out. As far as your kids go or grandkids, they should know who to call if they get separated from their family. If they're not old enough to remember the number or who lives in Chicago or Cincinnati or Miami or someplace, then give them a card to carry in their backpack or something. So if they're separated, they can say, I'm supposed to call Aunt so-and-so in St. Louis, and here's the number. It's our common contact. My mom's going to call that number too. Watch Facebook, Red Cross. They've gotten better at making contacts between families, and that's helpful. Keep in mind teaching your kids stranger danger. There's creeps out there who will say, I'm going to take you to your mom or your dad, or your parents are in the hospital. We teach people to have a secret word. And if they're here to help take somebody to their parents, the kid's supposed to ask, what's the secret word? They don't know the secret word, run. Next slide. There's more writing, that's good, thank you. Major disaster, there will not be enough emergency responders to handle all emergencies. We do not have enough responders if we get hit by a Cascadia event. Absolutely do not. Some of them won't get to the firehouse. Some of their engines may only get 2 blocks from the fire station. They may not be able to get to you. Same thing with ambulance. May not get to you for days. So have, first aid kits. Have enough water. We'll talk about that down the road here too, but a gallon per person per day, roughly. If it's hot weather, it's more. If it's cold weather, maybe less. And that's barely for bathing. That's mostly for just staying alive. You can probably manage with 2 quarts, but the recommendation is a gallon per day. And if you're going to keep 2 weeks worth, calculate that out. We have that at my house. With proper training, trained community members will be prepared to assist themselves, their families, and their neighbors to help protect lives. We have about 2,000 CERTs trained now in this city. There's about 2 million in the country. So you might have a CERT team in your neighborhood that can help you. There's another training called Map Your Neighborhood, which we also do, but COVID's going to have to pass. And that's where neighbors get together and learn who's got what in their neighborhood, who's a doctor, who's can take care of the kids, who can take care of the pets, who can handle chainsaws, and they can help take care of their family, their neighborhood. Map your neighborhood. Next slide. Basic first aid. Red Cross has a recurring class. How to use a fire extinguisher. There's something, by the way, something called Stop the Bleed, which is now a course that's going around too, that a lot of lives have been lost because of people bled out with arteries that are bleeding, and they'll teach you how to stop that. Even though I'm an MD and I may be able to help people in my neighborhood, I retired my license 6 years ago, and I have some stitches here, but I can't inject you with anything to numb your skin, unfortunately, because if you have a bad reaction, I'm up the creek. But I can stitch your skin, so I guess the old cowboy way is have you bite on a cork or take a swig or two of whiskey. But have the bandages and know about pressure points and cleaning up wounds a little bit. Know what not to do, like putting ointment on burns. We used to do that all the time. Don't do that. How to prepare your home, we'll talk about it. How to build a Go Kit, we'll talk about that, and how to stay safe. Next slide, please. So this is what I mentioned. This is some of the way to get information. For those of you who may have joined late, go to ready.gov. You can get everything I'm talking about and plenty more. And if you want to learn about hurricanes, you can. And if you can learn about earthquakes, you got it. And whatever preparations you can do, and it gives you references, it gives you groups to contact. I mean, it's what everybody needs to have. Unfortunately, if we have a disaster like an earthquake, you won't probably be able to get online. So there are books out there to buy, and mine really isn't in print per se anymore, but there's plenty of other books around to have. Next slide. I mentioned out-of-state contacts. And I talked about a contact card for each family member to keep handy. If you have a disaster, an earthquake in your home, and you have several family members, especially kids in your home, you can have a contact place just outside the house. Everybody get to that mailbox or something like that, because if it's a fire or house is collapsing, you need to know if the 5-year-old or the 8-year-old grandchild is still in the house or not. You don't want to go back in the house if they're actually in the backyard and put yourself at risk. So not only should they have a contact card, but they also should have a contact place. And you could even have a contact place in town, you know, the base of Spencer Butte or something. But and you can get inventive about it. But those are the standard things. It says teach family members how to use text messaging. The expectation and the experiencing is that phone calls will be busy. Everything's going to be busy. You're not going to get through because everybody and their brother's going to be trying to call. Text messages get through. They don't require the same thing as phone messages. So everybody should learn how to text, and kids are good at it. I mean, really good. But us older folks, some of us don't know how to do it. Some of us feel like we're intimidated. I text all the time. My thumbs hit wrong letters and then it corrects my words. So tell older folks to reread their note before they send it. But texting might save your life. Subscribe to alert services. With your pencils, write down an application called Alert Me. And all you got to do on your phone is go to apps and you tap on Alert Me. Doesn't cost you a thing. And it'll alert you if there's floods in your neighborhood, if there's a hazmat incident, if there's a Cascadia event. Sometimes this is done by neighborhoods, sometimes by select districts. They're pretty able to vary these according to the area that's affected. It used to be everybody got a reverse 911 call. But if you have your phone number registered with them, you'll get a reverse 911 call too, telling you what to do if you need to be doing something. I tell people to check with your children's or grandchildren's daycare, make sure they have an emergency plan, what they're going to do, because if there's a crisis, you want to know where they are, what they're planning to do. Are they going to go to the next building over? Will they be in the basement? Will they be in the hallway next to the walls? Do they have food? Is it somebody in your family who's in a nursing home? I mean, people are getting better and better at this, but I find out if they have it, get involved. If they don't, have things for emergencies. And there's different kinds of emergencies, you know, between fires and winter storms and Cascadia, the things can be a little different. You'll still need food, you still need clothes, you still need to be able to reach everybody, you still need medical care. Next slide. All right, so we talk about, this is an old slide actually, and we talk about in the older literature about a 72-hour kit. Everybody should have a 72-hour kit, meaning 3 days. That's changed to a 2-week kit now, because they have found the 72 hours are just not enough in many instances. A winter storm, you're probably okay. We were without power one winter storm for 8 days. So a 72-hour kit would have run short on us. No kit is perfect. You may need this kit for older people. You may need this kit for a pregnant mom. You may need this kit for little kids. You may need this kit for a baby. So what you may need may vary some. And so you have to design it accordingly. You may need this kit for a pet or two. And so you should have pets. Some of the places to stay will take hotels and Red Cross sites and churches, will take pets, some won't. Bring a leash, bring your own food. If your dog is acting out, they're not gonna take them. You're gonna have to adjust accordingly. If your dog's well behaved, they may well take them for you and you can visit them. They won't put them in with the people. They'll put them in a closely related site. Check food and water expiration dates. It's really easy to buy a whole bunch of stuff at Costco and pile it up somewhere in the house and then forget about it. When you go back, it's outdated. And although some foods may be okay, some foods and some water may be okay, it's of course not recommended they be used for eating or drinking. You can use the water, of course, for bathing and that sort. And there are kits of things to do with water, and we'll mention that too when we get here. All that's laid out again at ready.gov. I can't emphasize that enough. So you don't even have to listen to me now that you heard about ready.gov, but I'll try to give you a couple of clues that they won't say, might not. Next one. Okay. Well, it's kind of what I was talking about. This has got a few add-ons, and you don't want that in your basic kit. Your basic kit is basic things. My to-go kit is not something I can just grab and run out of the house. It's in the back of my SUV. And so in there, I have room to put tools and tapes and I don't know about bolt cutters, but I can have some of these things. Well, and actually, I want to digress for a second. The construction helmet reminds me of something. We have all our CERT trainees to have a construction helmet next to their bed. If there's an earthquake, you need the helmet to get out of there in case things are falling on you. We tell people to have slip-on shoes right next to the bed. You don't have time to tie it. Maybe a Velcro will work. You may want gloves, the kind of gloves like leather gloves so you can climb through things. And a flashlight that you check that works, a good one. You don't want a flashlight that when the building turns sideways, it rolls across the room and out the door. You want one that'll stay put. And there are some that have a night light. And so the night light attached to it will show a flashing red light or something will show you where it's at. And so those are good things. Go to the next slide. Medication. Real important thing here is I bet if I asked you guys, because you're my age group or younger, I'm older than everybody there, I think. What medicines do you take? I take the one in that pill box over there. No, I mean, what's the name of the medicine you take and how many milligrams do you take? If you have to run out of your house and get away, can you tell the Red Cross site or a new doctor you've never seen who has no records what the medicine was? You might say, I take a white pill for high blood pressure and I take a yellow pill for my heart. It doesn't help. There's several thousand pills. You need to know what you take. Put it in your wallet or your purse and the doses. have at least 3 days supply. Fortunately, this state and several others now, the pharmacies are allowed to give you an extra 30 days of your medicines. If you can just prove to them or say to them what it is you have, of course, pay for it, I guess. Forget about getting the codeine or the narcotics. Forget about the tranquilizers. They're not going to give you those because they're controlled substances, but they will give you your heart medicine, your blood pressure medicine, your diabetes medicine. Just know what it is. In Florida, they learned a long time ago where a lot of older folks retire. They show up at the shelters from hurricanes. People did not know what they took and why they took it. At best, they knew it was the color of the pills. So be one step ahead on that. It's nice to have your medical records if you can, and doctors will sometimes give you miniature copies. We now have systems where my chart with OMG, and I think Peace Health has a copy, where you can go online and maybe you'll be able to get your records. It's nice to be able to have that. Have maybe a copy of your EKG. If you're a heart patient, you can get a tiny copy. Anyway, have medications to go and have your non-prescription medicines. Know about foods, have a list in your purse or wallet that you should or shouldn't eat. You may be limited. If you're anywhere where there's medical people, they'll know what low salt means. But there are other variations on diet, and you should know what you're sensitive to. And most of us know what gives us a gut pain, but know what you need to know about your health situation. You can be your best protector. And in a way, it's interesting, the upper left of this slide has kind of what a to-go kit might look like, gloves and a flashlight and a cup and a little shovel. But you'll get the full list and you can pick and choose in there what you need, what you think you need, and batteries, or solar stuff. The trouble with solar stuff is the obvious in Oregon. You forget it unless it's summer. And Oregon, dress for rain, of course. Next slide, please. What number are we at? Don't know? It's all right. Kids and seniors, what I mentioned before, add-ons, diapers, you might not find any where you're going. So make sure. The other thing is, like I mentioned, having small bills and having some money. You may be in a scramble someplace to get some stuff, and there's limited stuff, and somebody else may want to buy it for 20 bucks or outbid you, and you need money, or they don't have change to give you, or whatever. I mean, they have oranges for $1 and you only have 20s. So have some small bills too. ATMs will be knocked out. And so don't count on that. Banks won't be open. Pharmacies may not be open, depending on what the disaster is. If we're talking about a winter storm, it's a whole lot different than we're talking about Cascadia. And as I mentioned at the beginning, I'm talking about the worst case scenario. If you're ready for that, you're ready pretty much for the winter storm. Next slide. I'm kind of shouting. If I'm too loud, let me know. All right, is this coming across okay? Okay, good. My wife and I, when we're talking to our phones, we shout as if we're trying to call out to somebody 1,000 miles away. Important documents, real important. You hardly hear anybody talk about it. You may not be able to replace these documents, the divorce papers, the house deed, the adoption papers, the custody papers, the immunization records, the bank accounts, stocks and bonds, birth certificates, insurance papers. We have a box that we grab as we go out of the house here, if we have to, that has all that in it. If you put it in a bank, that's kind of good, but if you can't get into the bank, you may have a problem. And so we're not trusting getting into a bank. Having a fireproof box is not a bad idea. Having it in something that you can lift that's not too heavy and take out with it is okay. And by the way, a gas tank that's half full is empty. When it comes to earthquakes, no half full tanks. That's not good enough. You might be stuck in, look at the people who got stuck, was it in Washington, for 23 hours or something? All the electric cars died. A lot of the gas cars died too. But you got to have a full tank. You never know. And if you look at the gridlock that happened in Houston, north of, I forget what hurricane that was now, Iris or something like that, it had terrible gridlock. They had several dozen deaths from people who scrambled out and got into gridlock and starved and tried to walk and got hit by cars, all kinds of things. Gridlock's not safe, but at least have emergency supplies. And be careful, because there may be people who want to take them away from you. And so I'm not allowed to tell you what to do, but just keep in mind, you have to be careful, because somebody else is hungry, somebody else thinks you have something they want. Given the worst case scenarios, that can be a risk also. In New Orleans, where they had the flooding, homes were busted into right and left, cars were broken into with people in them, jewelry stores were broken into, pharmacies were broken into. There were a lot of bad characters who came with their own boats. They showed up with their boats on trailers and they went into town. Next slide. So here's some additional considerations. Add-ons. I told you some of the add-ons. That we went, I think that's the slide we just did. Yeah, we just did that one.
I tried to back up and it wouldn't, it went way back.
You're fired.
There we go.
Need more? Okay, purify water. There's a life filter that you can suck on. It takes a lot of work, but you can almost suck water through out of mud. Not quite. You can buy that. There are stores in town that have preparedness equipment. There's plenty of preparedness companies online. The traditional is to put 8 drops of chlorine bleach in a gallon of water and wait 30 minutes. Keep in mind that's not so great if it's muddy water or rocky water, stones in it. Don't use perfumed bleach. That gets to be kind of vile. So there are things you can do. You have to be careful. You don't want to have a disaster, drink from the river, and then have god-awful diarrhea and dehydration as a consequence because you were really thirsty 5 hours ago. You almost better not drinking unless it's critical river water, unless you cure it first. Next, there's another part of the slide. I think there's 2 parts. Calories, yeah, that's super. Protein is important. Carbohydrates are important. You can learn about this again on ready.gov. But there are certain kinds of food that lend themselves better to storage. Seventh-day Adventists and Mormons in particular are experts at this. I mean, they have 2 years worth sometimes. You don't need that. But having enough for 14 days and having the right kind of food, high calorie bars to eat. Remember, if you have kids with, they're going to want certain things and not others. And it may be hard to convince them to eat stuff they don't like. You can get these 1 month, 3 month products of food for a family from 4 patrons, and can't think of all the names now, but they're making a lot of money these days. And I have several of those get-ups, and you can have all kinds of wonderful dishes. At least that's what it says. You just have to add water. You got to have water. And then remember, you have to monitor this and not eat it all up right away. You don't know how long you're going to be in trouble. And so be smart about it. Heating food, there are solar products, there are sterno cans, there are camping things for equipment. LED flashlights are much better than regular flashlights. They last longer usually, and they are brighter. Some folks get out there and have tents and sleeping bags and tarps. At least have plastic paper, rolled paper, I'm losing the word. Us old people forget words, for protection. You can wrap it for tents. You can use it for clear cellophane paper. Actually, the saran wrap, if you have somebody who's injured and they have a kind of a floppy arm, you can saran wrap their body with saran wrap with their shoulder stuck to their chest. It can actually be used to keep somebody warm in a sense, but it keeps you confined. But you may want that. Next one. Plan evacuation routes and meet up in spots. I know 3 evacuation routes from where I live, and it gets bigger, better as I get closer to town. But keep in mind, if people are told to evacuate, the roads are going to get crowded. So be fast, be careful, be prepared, and know the routes, know the alternatives. This is a picture of somebody's home. Look at your home closely, front and back, side, or windows. What's the best way to get out of here? And like I said before, I can't emphasize it enough. Teach your kids and teach your kids by practice. They remember much better shooting a basketball through a hoop if they've practiced it 100 times or 1,000 times. Same thing, running out of a house and where to go. And as silly as it may feel, it gives them that muscle memory. You ever have this, where you go into a room and forget what you were there for? I mean, I have that not uncommonly, but I remember that I was supposed to be in the room, and I keep kind of listening where my muscles are taking me. And they usually take me to the right place, and I have no idea where I was going. And so the same thing, I'm joking, but it's the same thing with evacuation routes. Practice it. So their muscle memory says, run to that post office box, mailbox, or that telephone pole, or at least get out into the street. If you're downtown and you're in a 5-story building, like I said, get 5 stories away from that building. You'll see this common mistake when you look at slides. In fact, I think you even see them on ready.gov, where they have this yellow tape around a building with lots of bricks on the ground, and there's yellow tapes around the building to stay away. Sometimes that's not more than a half a story distance from the damn building. Don't do that. Get 5 stories away or 4 stories away. Get in the middle of the street. Get under a car. Next slide. I told you about establishing out-of-state contact. Make sure everyone has a hard copy. Next slide. All right, on ready.gov and FEMA.gov, you'll see some things about anchoring and securing heavy furniture. I'm certain that I will die from knickknacks falling on me in my house, but make sure things aren't going to fall on you. Refrigerator with an earthquake will literally march across the room. Keep that in mind. Things that are up high will fall on you, and they can be disastrous. And like I said, an awful lot of the injuries that we see in disasters are things falling on people. TV sets are notorious. Piano may fall over on you. You have to just go over your home and anchor what you can anchor. If you live in a mobile home, that's got to be secured. Make sure your home is anchored. And if there's been some earthquakes and some aftershocks, go out and check to see if you're anchored. Next one. Yeah, cabinets, the last slide that kind of shot by. Cabinets will fly open and everything in them will come down on you. This is another calculation of sorts about danger to your home. And again, get the slides, but basically red is bad and green is pretty okay. And you get numbers by calculating how bad your, if this is the tsunami, the Cascadia, Eugene's kind of in the middle. Go to the next slide and I'll show you what I'm talking about. If you want to calculate real quickly, I'll go slower here. Next slide. Our structural quiz. All right, there you go. When was your home built? Before 1960, it's 5 points. 61 to 78. Go back. Oh,
No, I can't.
don't go on. Okay,
because
68.
it'll go way, way back.
Okay, 68 to something like 90 was 3 points, and after 90 was something like 1 point. Don't go on. So put that down. And then how tall is your home? Stay here. 2 or more stories, 5 points. Split level on a hillside or gentle slope, 6 points. 1 story, 3 or more steps, 4 points. 1 story, less than 3 steps up to the front door, 1 point. So add that with the previous calculation, and now go to the next slide. How hard is the ground? How hard is the ground likely to shake under your home? it's a hard one for you to know because dry periods, it looks harder than other times. But if it's sandy, you got trouble. You're more in the red with points. If you're on a mountain or hillside or Spencer Butte, it's less likely to fall. I don't know about not the fairgrounds, Fairmont area, but somewhere in between. Anyway, give yourself, something in between at a minimum. And then next slide. And total points. And if you're 13 or more points, your home may be at a risk, and you may want some expert to come out and take a look to see if a contractor, an architect, or an engineer to see if something can be done to shore things up a little bit more. Like I said, this is being recorded, so you can, if you didn't get it fast enough, you can go back and visit all this. Next slide. Make sure your fire extinguisher is ready. Now, most people will think that you get one of these little ones at the size of a cup. That lasts for about 3 seconds. Won't do you any good other than a tiny, tiny, tiny fire. The big ones that are about as big as my hands are apart, they won't last more than 20 or 30 seconds. So you haven't got a lot going here to protect yourself, but you should have it at least for a fire stove. Green is good. If you look at the top of the fire extinguisher, that tells you that you're ready to go. And if it's elsewhere, read what it says on the side. These things should be pounded once a month to loosen up the powder inside. There is a phenomenon that's now been invented that people have. I have several of them. There are these balls that you can throw into a fire and they explode and they put fire extinguisher chemical out about 10 feet each way. And they come in a couple different sizes. And I have several of those. I carry a couple in my car. And so I think that's a good thing to have. Go to the next slide. A lot of people don't know how to use this. So the acronym, I think, is PASS, P-A-S-S. There's a pin, that silver looking circle up here. That's called a pin with it's got something holding it. You pull that out. Go to the next slide. Aim the hose. That's your hose to the left. Aim it first. Don't do anything. Just aim it, and aim it at the bottom of the fire. The common mistake is to aim it at the top. No, you got to aim it at the bottom. You don't have a lot of fire extinguisher to work with. You got to aim it at the bottom. Next one, squeeze the handle. Now we have people practice with one quick squeeze to make sure the thing works before you approach the fire. You got to get kind of close. You got to get close enough to kind of feel the heat. And then you sweep the base as you squeeze and you run the hose along. And in CERTs, we train people to do that. And that's good for a fire, a stove fire. That's good for a wastebasket size fire. If you have a wall that's on fire, get out of there. That's not going to help you at all. I've seen people show up at grass fires with these things. That won't do you any good. This is 20 seconds worth on a stove fire. And you should have a extinguisher near your stove or one of these fire blankets that you can pull over your stove, or one of these fireballs. I think one of the companies that makes it is AFO, but I'm sure you can Google it. Go to the next slide. Another thing, I don't expect you to remember this well, but you'll find this at ready.gov, how to turn off your gas. If you have natural gas, there's a way to turn it off outside. And it just, instead of having this black thing in the middle where the wrench is attached pointing upward, you just turn it sideways. That says it's off. Know how to shut your gas off. When I first learned to do that, it's kind of the teenager in me wanted to go around to homes and turn it off, but I didn't, because we have them all outside. But you don't want to turn anybody's off, but you may want to turn yours off, especially if you smell gas. And the gas smells like bad eggs, old eggs, sulfur smell. So don't turn your gas off. And then you can't turn it on. Remember that. It's too dangerous to turn on. You got to get somebody from the gas company to turn it on. And given a major disaster, it'll take a while for them to get out to you. Next slide. And here's a picture of water mains. You may have something flooding your house. Usually that comes from a valve out in front of your house, know where that is, know how to turn that off. That's a whole lot easier to turn off. And the text that I referred you to will show you that better. But a wrench, if you don't have a special wrench, which you can get, you can kind of do it with a regular wrench. That's not as dangerous, of course, as the gas leak. Next slide. Shut off your electricity. Most people know how to do that, either with a circuit breaker or each fuse, but you may want to shut those off, especially with a gas leak. Flooding would be not a bad idea. Certain circumstances, if you have what's the word I want? Something to produce your electricity outside, generator, thank you. You may have to know how to turn off fuses and fuse boxes. So know what to do. And if you're depending on your spouse to help you, and you don't know how, not a good idea. I remember when I was in medical school, I used to teach driving to make some money for my expenses. And it was not uncommon for me to get a widow who couldn't drive because her husband did all the driving. And so it's not uncommon for that situation where the wife really doesn't know how to do a lot of these things, and the man does. Maybe things have improved since those days, but everybody should know how to do this. Next slide. All right, after an earthquake, check for injuries to yourself first. Sort of like airplanes, put the oxygen on you before you put it on your child. You got to stop the bleeding on yourself or get somebody to stop it. Do not attempt to move seriously injured people, unless they are in danger of further injury. When the house is going to collapse, the house is on fire, get them out of there. If it doesn't look, it's hard to know sometimes, if it doesn't look like there's a danger, moving them might be more dangerous, cause further harm. Check for fires. That's a big deal because fires will change things in a big way fairly quickly. Some of this is common sense, of course. If indoors, check for structural aspects of the building. If any part of the building appears to be unsafe, evacuate the building. Our CERTs are not allowed to go into buildings if it looks like there's structural abnormalities. Wear shoes in all areas near debris or broken glass. I said get shoes on by your bed if there's an earthquake. Get decent shoes on if you can, and maybe later get boots on or something, because what you're going to be walking across is broken glass. So barefoot is not going to cut it. You're going to be injured very soon, very quickly. Do not touch down power lines or objects touched by down power lines. Don't move down power line with something metal. Don't move one. But if you're going to have to touch it for some reason, don't do it with something wooden. Next. Clean up spilled medicines, other potentially harmful materials, open windows to provide ventilation, check for damaged utilities, gas by smell. It used to be people didn't have that smell to tell, but I think most, if not all, communities now have that. I heard of one in Washington some time ago, but I would guess it's corrected. Shut off water, shut off electricity, shut off gas for what's needed. Don't eat or drink anything from open containers or near shattered glass. Open containers, you don't know what was in that. You don't know if it's still good or not. Don't touch it. Don't drink it. I've had a couple of cases through the years where people have died from drinking insecticide because they thought it was, somebody put the insecticide in like an old Coke bottle, didn't label it. And I remember one person in particular, somebody here in town, it was a lot of years ago, just took a swig. That was enough. It was sad, it was bad, and it was a healthy person. Don't eat or drink anything. I said that. It powers off, plan meals to use foods which will spoil quickly. So think about stews. Everything you can put in a stew if you have to, but eat the things that'll perish first, perishable foods, and put off anything that can be put off. Powers off, plan meals and foods will spoil quickly. Keep refrigerator, freezer closed. Every time you open up that freezer, you take time off the clock. In this town, you know, in some of the more northern towns, you can use the snow pile, you know, put some of your food in, but keep in mind, raccoons will probably eat it. during the night. And so keep that in mind. And they're really good at getting into things. Next slide. I'll try to get to this in quickly. Use outdoor charcoal propane broilers for emergency cooking. Do not cook indoors. I've had people die from using that indoors, even charcoal grills. Do not use your telephone except for genuine emergency calls. Text, I mentioned to you. Check for chimney for cracks. I mentioned that to you. Check closets, storage shelf areas. If you open something, something may fall on you that you don't want. So check all that. Open slowly. Next slide. I'm trying to get done here so you can ask questions. Local stations, emergency radio. Have a radio with batteries. Have a radio you can wind up. Listen to the radio in your car. You will be able to tell which station is functioning. TV sets may tell you where to listen, what to listen to. Radio stations will tell you what to listen to. There's always one designated station for emergency information. Next slide. Don't go sightseeing. Don't get in the way. Be prepared for additional aftershocks. They're usually smaller, but they can be just as bad. And we skipped a line there, but
Yeah, try to go back.
don't worry about it. Oh, now we're back to the beginning. So keep going.
Yeah.
Like I said, I've said it many times, you can get all this information and more on ready.gov. And so don't feel bad if you missed something or you didn't understand something or you want to visit another way. Go on next. Don't leave this slide. Just go on.
Yeah.
Yeah, go on down. Respond to requests to help from police. You're supposed to help police if they ask for it, and others. Information concerning the welfare of separated family members will be handled by the American Red Cross. They are working with Facebook. So that's one option. You should have other contacts that you can contact if they're not in danger. Or war situation would be a whole lot different than a local winter storm. Okay, next. Now we're almost at the end. You can always get more by becoming an amateur radio operator. I am. I didn't know anything about ham operations. I still don't know much, but I have a radio. I can talk to anybody in the city. They're prepared to work when power's gone. And there's a line of them. So you can get actually reach the emergency operations center because somebody in the valley will take my call because I live in the hills, and somebody in the valley will send it to somebody else in the valley, and we'll get to the emergency operations. Get to know your neighbors and learn map your neighborhood, and know about their special skills. Go on. Next. Yeah, next. I think this is about it. This is how it all kind of stacks up. You are the best help for yourself. Your neighbors are the second best help for yourself, given an earthquake. And even given the first 30 seconds, a minute, 5 minutes of most disasters. Even know how to do CPR. If it's an earthquake, CPR isn't going to be worthwhile, unfortunately, because nobody's going to come in time. I mean, give it a try, of course, but pay attention more to the person who's bleeding. Stop the bleeding. That's where you save the lives. I think that's it. Let's see, and then I can ask for questions. That's just about our CERT program, which I mentioned. And that's a whole hour talk on what we do. Review their actions that should be taken before, during, and after an event that are unique to each hazard. Identify the hazards that have happened or could happen in your area and plan for the unique actions for each. Why don't we leave it at that? Anybody have any? Yeah, these are FEMA sites. There's www.ready.gov, but if you just Google ready.gov or FEMA.gov or redcross.org, you have got it. Pandemic flu isn't too relevant right now, although it is a little bit. Eugene CERT, for my people that I train, that's very valuable, but you can get all this and more that way. So, all right, I made it in an hour and 12 minutes, which what I was trying to aim for is an hour and 15. If anybody has any questions or maybe Judy can give out my email if somebody wants to ask a question later on, or Phyllis can. Feel free to ask me. Emily?
First of all, I'd like to say that Southeast Neighbors, and a lot of us are in the Southeast neighborhood, has extensively worked on disaster prep. They're on the first, the second Tuesday night of March. There'll be a meeting online, and it'll have somebody from the city talking about this also. And every so many blocks, people have walkie-talkies. I have one, and it's to gather, help neighbors help each other. So if interested, please come to the meeting, or Dennis Bear is is the chair of the neighborhood. He'd be happy to talk with you, or you can go online to the SEN neighborhood site and find out lots more about this. And I have a question for you, Jeff. If there were an earthquake and the dams broke, do you know where the water line would come up to? Like I heard once it would come up to 30th Street. Do you know anything about this?
Yeah, you're a CERT too, aren't you? I
No,
recognize
I'm
you.
not sure. No, I'm just on the board, SEN board.
Oh, I've seen you somewhere, somehow. Anyway, there's actually maps that show if you're on this side, on the west side of I-5, your chances of getting flooding is slim. But you can, depending on how many dams and that sort. Keep in mind, the dams take several hours for the water to get down here. So you'll have a lot of notice. It could conceivably, this case scenario, be 2 stories high downtown. And actually the Coast Guard, we have people in Coast Guard in this town. They actually drill to help boats getting people out of the 2nd and 3rd story of buildings. But the likelihood is slim. It's going to be Springfield, and you can get those maps on, it's Dogami, D-O-G-A-M-I. It's the geology section of the government, of the state government, and it'll show you slides. You can also get them maybe from the Springfield government. Ken Vogany, who's one of the people I work with, he's given the talk. I've heard it twice. I've seen the maps. I-5 is kind of the place, but not a guarantee. And like I say, it'll take a while. You'll be able to get information before it hopefully before it hits. And the other thing is, they don't think the dams are going to go down with an earthquake. Lots of people think dams are going to collapse, and who knows? But they're high up, they're far away from where the problem should happen. So we probably won't have that happen.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Yes, Marty. I know you too.
Yeah, I haven't had as good a doctor since you retired,
Oh,
Jeff.
gosh.
I'm still
Thank you.
mourning that. I
Thank you.
wanted to ask, where do we go for information? Which radio station, or will they all have emergency information and warnings?
No, a real disaster, they'll only have one. Your TV set will have a thing coming by telling you where you can get information. That's if the TV set and electricity is still functioning. Otherwise, you got to put on your radio and dial till you get the station. It'll probably be KPNW or KUGM. I mean, it's going to be the ones with the biggest power and the most common ones. They have to, they might have their antennas knocked down. That could change to who it's going to be. They may not have their people be able to show up. So they have their own system of deciding who and what. Just get one of the radios and wind it up, or get the batteries, and you'll be able to figure that out. I hope.
Thank you.
I hope your kids are okay.
They no longer live here. They're not in subduction or
Yeah, well, there's hardly a place down the East Coast, right?
surprising places, Boise and Atlanta.
Oh yeah. Well, every neighborhood, in the city, in the country, every city has got some catastrophe, including, potentially terrorists and things of that sort. So, I mean, you can find things. Martha, you got your hand up?
Yeah, so all of this is good information if you're at home and you have your kits and all that kind of stuff. But what's your advice if you're out and about, you're in your car, in the grocery store? What's your advice then?
Again, you can get a lot of this information online, but I have my to-go kit in the back of my car. So I already have 3 days worth of food and a few days worth of water and a basic first aid kit, things along that line, and other things relevant to what I do. So I have it in my car to help. I mean, the same rules apply about drop and cover
Okay.
with earthquake. The same rules apply to get out of the building and get away from it. Stay put. The same rules apply about contacting, a common contact. A lot of the rules work. Like I said, if you've got the earthquake down, you've got a lot of it down already.
Okay.
Good. Lisa?
Hi, thanks so much for doing this and
My
for
pleasure.
those who organized it. Two thoughts. One is about the dams and the other is about ham. Emily, you were asking about the flooding. I looked at, about several years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, something, they had those maps available. People had to sign and make an appointment to go look at those maps. And I did look at those, and I can tell you TBI is 2 blocks outside of the flooding if all the dams broke. I'm on Potter Street, just down the hill from TBI, and the flood, if everything broke, the floods would come to the alley right behind my house. So uphill TBI, perfectly good spot. And they've got, a big gathering spot in the parking lot. The other thing was about ham radios. We at TBI have one of the premier ham radio teachers who has a connection to the sisterhood. Sandra Lux's son-in-law,
Son-in-law.
Scott in 7JI, is a ham teacher of extraordinary skills, and several of us
Absolutely.
through the synagogue have gotten ham training through him. I have passed one of my levels, W7LJK, and LJP, and so Scott maybe be able to do something for the sisterhood if you ever wanted it, but his training is a day and a half long, but he's great at it. And now he does it on Zoom too. So maybe you could connect sisterhood and Scott.
You have another member too. I haven't been to TBI in a long time, but Mike Spicer, is he still a member?
He sure
I-
is.
And Gary Rayer is also ham.
Well, Mike's taken not only my training, but he's become a trainer above and beyond me of sorts. He's a firefighter, and he's very valuable to have around. So him too.
I don't know
and
if he does. I don't know if he does ham radio training. I haven't seen him around.
No, not ham radio.
Oh,
No, Scott.
I've done the CERT training too at the
Yeah.
city, but
Yeah. Well, I'm just talking about people that you can talk to about information, maybe other training sessions of the sort. Mike would be another good resource. But Scott's superb. I know Scott. He took training with me too.
What?
And it's Carol. Are you Kramer? You have a hand up? Carol Kramer.
Jeff, what's your
Yes,
ham number?
yes.
K7 DFS. K7 DFS.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So I think we're
Hi.
done.
Wait,
No,
Carol.
I'm here. I'm
Okay.
here. I wanted to say that I remember reading that water was much more important than food, that you can live for a long, long time without food.
Actually, some of us can live very long times without food, without saying any more about it. In actuality, we used to have a rule of fours, and it was like 4 minutes without oxygen. I mean, you can't go longer than 4 minutes. 4 days without water and 4 weeks without food. That's kind of how it stacks out. It's not quite precise, but yeah, most of us have a reservoir of calories and we can make it for a while. But it's the water that's critical. And so, as I mentioned, a gallon per day per person. And like you can struggle and get away with 2. You won't be able to clean much of anything. Yeah, it depends on the weather too. Yeah, that's the most important thing to have, I think. And I have a lot of it around. I have a 30-gallon tank that we keep just to put in the toilets if it's that bad, flush the toilets. And because I live out in the country, and then we have a lot of gallon tanks that I've picked up at the store, and I have the mechanisms to clean the water too if I need to. Worst case scenario, boil it. But you know why? You don't have to make water as hot as boiling to make it safe. And the reason is it's boiled. I usually do this to students. Why do you think we boil the water? I won't do that to you, because we can't tell when it's reached the temperature that it's safe at. The only temperature you can tell is the boiling temperature. And so that's why we have people boil it. I think Martha, you got your hand up?
Yeah. I wanted to ask about the water. You said, and it's a good idea. I have water stored that's gone out of date. Now I've learned to put the date on the water, the big gallon jugs when I buy them, and put them in my garage cupboards. But what about carrying all that heavy stuff around in your car? Do you carry water for 3 days in your car, or water for a day?
Well, it's easy to carry the water in my car. I mean, I just have it in the back. But lifting water is very heavy. I mean,
Yeah.
to lift a 5-gallon thing of water is awful. I mean, for me, it is anyway. I'm in my 70s. And so, yeah, it's a struggle. But I only need 2.5 or 3 for the toilets. But in my car or my garage, that's not a problem. I just, like I said, the gallon containers at the grocery store where they come, pure, sterile, that's not too heavy for most of us. Yeah, water's most important. That and oxygen, but you can't stock oxygen, I don't think. Phyllis.
This is just from personal experience. I'm an earthquake magnet. I've lived through quite a number of them and have had several occasions where doorways are impassable. The house shifted enough, the buildings have shifted enough so that we couldn't get out doorways, and 2 of the occasions needed to break windows and climb out. So just folks should sort of keep in mind a way to get out other than doorways.
Yeah, I mentioned having several exits in mind, and sure, windows are always an option. Be careful. A lot of us have our beds next to a window. Some of us have our children next to a window. Some of us have cribs next to windows. Not a good place if there's an earthquake. And so if you have a grandchild who's got a crib next to a window, you might talk to the parents about that. Same thing with those cords that you pull down. If you have cords that are tied together at the bottom, children have been known to hang themselves on those. Cut them apart. I'm loaded with all kinds of tidbits of that sort, but I can't give it to you. Yeah, Emily.
So this is a question about water. So let's say you get a bunch of gallon containers from the store and the expiration is coming up. Okay, maybe you'll water your plants outside or something. You think it's safe to just put in filtered water into those containers, and how long would it last for?
Boy, I don't know. That's come up a number of times. I don't think anybody can tell you how long it'll last. I don't think filtered water in a disaster, unless I was really pressed, I wouldn't want to be drinking it too long. I mean, a few days or so. We don't know how long it'll last if you do it. We know how.
I mean, like before another earthquake. Let's say your water. You see, it's going to expire tomorrow, so you empty it all out and you fill the jugs again.
Yeah.
How long will it last? Do we know?
Probably several days. I told my daughter would run in. They just ran in the room. They'll leave too. They just come in and say I'm in the house. I can't answer you exactly. I think I'd be careful about drinking that after a few days, depending on the circumstances. If it's cold weather versus hot weather, if it's clean water versus not. But you can get these life straws, and you've maybe seen them advertised, and you can suck it through this filter, and it pretty much takes everything out. I would at least do that if you can. They're not
So-
terribly expensive.
So you're suggesting that every, I don't know, let's say the water's good for 6 months, that you just buy new water every 6 months?
But
Uh,
what a lot of
you gotta
people do is rotate. So you buy and then you use. So if you keep like cold water in your fridge, use that water. And then when you go to the grocery store, you replace it. So you're constantly, renewing that supply. That's one of the things that I've seen that people do. So for exactly that reason, so you're not sitting there with, 14 gallons of water that are all already 6 months old.
That's what I do. I sit there with 14 gallons and I use them as the dates run down and I replace them. They're not terribly expensive. They're a buck a piece or something. And I use them for plants after that. And disasters bring out all kinds of things, but I don't think I'd want to fill them up and then try to decide how long they're going to be good for. If it's a disaster, the water, you may not be getting water. But if you do get water, you don't know how pure it is even. You have to be careful. I think we've covered it. I'm available if you have any questions. Phyllis can give you a way to reach me. I'll be glad to answer any questions. Remember ready.gov. I've said it about 10 times. Thank you, Marty. It's nice seeing everybody.
Jeff,
And
thank you so much.
my pleasure.
And I'll send out a note with the YouTube information when we get that posted. It will be on Temple Beth Israel's YouTube
cool.
channel.
Oh,
So I'll send out a blurb to let folks know when that's up and ready.
I should have dressed up. I forgot about that part. All right. Nice seeing everybody.
Thank you so much,
Bye.
Jeff.
Bye.
Thank you all for joining us.
My
Be
pleasure.
safe.
Thanks, Phyllis.
Yeah, thank you.